Today, the Conservative Party, the party that had been in government in the UK for 14 years up until just a few months ago, has chosen its new leader. And that leader, rather as expected, is Kemi Badenoch. The turnout of the election was respectable at 70%, but down a bit, largely reflecting the fact that both of the runoff candidates were considered to be on the right of the party, having seen the loss of James Cleverly from the list. Presumably, there were significant numbers who would have voted for the relatively centrist Cleverly, who didn't feel that they could bring themselves to vote for either of the two that were still on the list. And maybe they're right. The Tory membership have shown often in the past that left to their own devices, they will vote on ideology over competence, condemn themselves to irrelevance, while the consequences play themselves out. Is this one of those times? Well, let's see. For me as a floating voter, what I look for when the election comes around is first and foremost is the leader within sight of the centre ground. And secondly, are they competent? What we don't know with the election of Kemi Badenoch is how that equation will look in 5 years' time, which is when the election's most likely to happen. For one thing, during the leadership election, candidates have the incentive to emphasise their right-wing credentials above and beyond anything else, because that's the nature of the electorate that they're playing to. The base is more to the right. Doesn't necessarily speak to the candidate's ability to take their core beliefs and values and then transform them into language that can appeal to the centre. Arguably, Margaret Thatcher achieved this. She was certainly to the right of her party, quite a radical by the standards of the political spectrum as it existed at that time. But she certainly knew how to speak to ordinary people, how to frame what she was trying to do in words that would resonate with them. Hence why she was one of the most successful election-winning politicians of the modern era. Could Kemi Badenoch do something similar? Maybe. Unlike her opponent in his leadership election, Badenoch did not jump straight in to tie her hands by signing up to policies that the base would most approve of. Robert Jenrick, her opponent, did indeed jump headlong into the commitment, for example, to leave the European Court of Human Rights and to set a cap for immigration numbers. Those are the sort of promises that are relatively easy to make to a Conservative base 5 years away from an election, before any scrutiny of the potential consequences has hit the public sphere of discourse. But intriguingly, Badenoch refused to play the game. She said, "This leadership contest is not a test of who can make the biggest promises. It is about character." I agree. And she added, "We are not in government anymore. It doesn't matter what our policies are right now. We cannot deliver them. We are in opposition, so let's use that time wisely." I find that pretty encouraging as a first indicator. Firstly, to have the clear-sightedness to know that the contest is about the quality of the character of the person, not the policy. And secondly, that the Conservative Party, if it's going to be fit to return to government again in the future, needs to end its period of division and reunite. So about the ECHR argument of her opponent, she said this: "The ECHR argument is not the right one. I think that is the biggest weakness. I think it will divide our party. It will mean that the infighting and the squabbling will continue. We need to come to a consensus." Her basic conclusion on the ECHR was that there are positive as well as negative aspects, which means the trade-offs need to be carefully considered. Before the debate where this was said, the received wisdom was certainly that the candidate who pledged the most wholeheartedly to the most red in tooth and claw populist right policies would get the membership vote. So saying what she did took a degree of courage and commitment. Interestingly, Jenrick was preferred over Badenoch by Reform UK voters. The fact that a significant number of Conservative members left and went to Reform UK could even be the thing that meant that it wasn't quite so straightforward this time, because of those people were not now in the voting pool. However, Badenoch's position in the debate was well argued, seemed better received by the audience, and the polling since consistently put her as the front runner. A leader whose right-wing credentials are taken on trust, but who nevertheless knows that the broad party has to be recruited to be on side for the journey, and who weighs up the pros and the cons very carefully, could be the sort of politician who will ultimately be capable of winning the trust of floating voters in an election. Obviously, that's not guaranteed. Yes, she conveys confidence and intellectual capacity, political competence. Now, could turn out to be an illusion. The role of leader pretty quickly, brutally sorts out the wheat from the chaff. And even if in a different era she would have been superb, she does inherit a political party that has gotten into the casual habit of internecine warfare in recent years. She's known for apparently an abrasive edge in private, so whether her undoubted skills will extend to actually being able to build a team of committed supporters behind her, that seriously remains to be seen. In the short term, the job of the Tory party leader is to provide opposition and accountability for the Labour government. All governments need to be held to account and to be challenged, preferably to be done so competently. The danger of one that has a huge majority is that it feels it can ignore objections and counter-arguments and simply do whatever it wants. I do think, at least, that Kemi Badenoch will make Keir Starmer's weekly Prime Minister's questions something of a trial for him, which is good. I mean, even if you support the government, and like most floating voters, I want them to succeed, not to fail, because it would be better for the country. But even the best policies get sharpened up and improved when subjected to high-quality critical scrutiny. Our country will do best and will resist the populist nonsense that's infected the United States more robustly if it has a competent government, yes, held to account by a competent opposition. Now, Labour hasn't made the best of starts. It may get better as they get the hang of the job of government, and they get challenged day after day to be better by the opposition. I mean, that's the hope. If Labour doesn't improve, then it will deserve to be highly vulnerable, and that, as much as Kemi Badenoch's leadership, may well get the bulk of the Conservative Party to become united enough to persuade the country that one term out of office was enough to renew the batteries. Nobody would have predicted any such thing the day after the election, for sure, but right now it seems as though anything is possible. So, for both sides, there is everything to play for.